if you're just coming in, these are photos of the one 90-minute rehearsal that they had. So this is 6 o'clock at night on the night of the performance. Hi, everybody. Welcome. I'd like to thank Jody for hosting this and the 5 sessions and 90 minutes every evening. It's a big commitment. So thank you so much, Jody. And this is the first time that we've had our community anyway, that we've been advertising through, have had a multi-session discussion and viewing. And Bob Cowherd, who I see is on the link, has been wanting me to do for a long time a sort of director's cut version of translation where everything's explained. And this won't quite be that, but it's the closest that we've done. We don't have time for this to be exactly that, but it'll be a sort of close. Thank you for everybody who's tuned in and dedicated time, and also to everybody who accesses this later. These files will be on a link later that we'll share with you, and so they can be watched anytime. And so a big formal thank you here in public to Kipur Boas Moro for the beautiful performance, to the 100 musicians and singers that took part, and to all the technicians. It was a huge technical crew, to everybody who contributed. It was a huge endeavor for everybody. We have about 45 minutes of material that we'll be watching today, so we'll get to it very quickly. But I just wanted to digress for a moment to kind of tell you a few things about my background so that my perspective would be clear. Some of you must be maybe wondering, why am I standing in as some sort of authority? Kiparabo will be coming in on the final session for the second half. But for the first 4.5 sessions, I will be your guide. I've lived in Java for 30 years. I arrived in late 1991. And I'm married to Bapak Wakidi Dujo Martono, who is a renowned kendang player. And when I first came to Java, I was studying gamelan, but actually for the first 3 years, also focusing on wayang, because he was going around to all these wayang that he was performing in the Wonogiri area with a number of different dalang. And I was studying how to be a gender player for all those dalang, thanks to my teacher at Berkeley, Mas Midianto, who was family with that whole group, and my husband who was playing for them. So it really started with wayang, but like Jody, very much like what she said, I didn't understand a word pretty much of Javanese. And I remember actually telling some friends of mine who had come to visit, oh, it doesn't really matter what they're saying, it's the feeling. And it's amazing to think of it now, but I did say that at one point. After about 3 years of focusing on Gender and Wayang, I moved to Jakarta and started working at Jakarta International School. My husband came with me and we set up a studio in Jakarta with rehearsals. And I moved into the concert music area, Kelenengan, learning how to play kendang. I spent a number of years on kendang and a number of years on rebab. Still always working on kendang and gender. And then a number of years studying sindenan and gerongan and tatambangan and all the vocal parts. And in 2001, I was looking, 10 years after I'd arrived, I was looking for a new project and decided to dedicate time to wayang, to go back to wayang, but really delve into it from the aspect of language and the stylistic and dramatic elements, all the stories, all the primary sources that I could get my hands on, everything about the characters, the philosophy. I wasn't actually manipulating wayang figures in my hand. I wasn't trying to be a dalang. I was looking at all the other aspects, dramatic, literary, philosophical. And after a number of years, in 2004, I decided I wanted to follow one dalang, because I was noticing that dalang, if you were performing Dewaruti one night and then again 5 nights later, it was really quite different. And I was interested in following one dalang's sort of story. What happens when you perform a few nights later and it's different, and why? And what parts of it are different, and how are you preparing? And I started to learn that dalang, all dalang, prepare very carefully in some ways, and especially now are writing their own narrative parts. It's very important that we know what they're saying. They're spending almost most of their time writing little bits of philosophy or whatever they want to say, and arranging the musical part. So I wanted to study all of that. And I ran into Kipura Boas Moro kind of just by chance. I had a performance through a group that I was rehearsing with, and I just decided right away that he was the one that I wanted to study with. And I started in 2004. And here in 2022, I'm still learning things every single day about his style and about, I've seen Deoruchi now some 32 times. And if I went to see Deoruchi performed by Keyboard Boss Moto, there would be new things all the time. So I did, as Jody said, develop a translation technique so that I could share when we went overseas and when foreigners came into town, what the Dalang was saying. And that's what you will see on the recording if you haven't seen that before, but I think everybody who's here right now has seen that before. There's really no way to prepare ahead of, well, you can prepare ahead of time for translation. There's a lot you can do ahead of time, but I can't prepare something that I'm going to copy and paste with any Dalang, because everything is quite really flexible and fluid. And so this spontaneous translation has worked, and we continue to do it every month. So I'll start here with just showing you sort of what happened, how the performance got started, how the plan for the performance began. So on December 15th, of last year, 2021, UNESCO announced that Gamelan was going to be recognized as an intangible cultural heritage of the world. And the community, I happen to be in Buffalo, New York, but the community of Central Javanese musicians anyway, just went so exuberantly enthusiastic. They were just over the top. They were so happy because Wayang had been recognized in 2003, quite 18 years previous. Batik had already been recognized. The traditional dagger, the kris, had already been recognized, and some nine other pieces of art forms had been recognized. And a lot of people in Central Java, even Dalang, were saying Gamelan should have been first. And we can talk another time about the process. UNESCO doesn't determine the process. People have to apply. So Gamelan wasn't first because people from Indonesia didn't apply for Gamelan to be first. It was the Dalang community that was active and applied for Wayang. But anyway, people were so exuberantly happy. And I remember that a few hours after the announcement, just a very few hours after the announcement, Kipura Basmoro sent me a message and he said, I'm going to put on a performance that explores the myths and the legends around the existence of gamelan in the hands of mortals. And I'm going to do it as a celebration of this great announcement. It was about 2 hours after the announcement. And the legend that he ended up putting together, I mean, it's not a historical thing, it's a legend, it's a myth. But from the legendary sources that he put it together, the idea is this takes place over about this period from 245 to 415. About that the Wayang that he did takes place over that time, that about 170 years, this myth. And it turns out, we found out later, Jody and I have found out, that in 2012, there was a performance of a similar story in York by a British group, but we'll leave that for another discussion another time. I can guarantee that I know that Kipur Basmora did not know about that performance. His decision to make this was very spontaneous and in the moment. And he did not know about that performance. He used a lot of his ideas came from what's written in the Wedo Pradongo. And I will give this link to the slideshow so that you have the links to the Wedo Pradongo and everything. This is about how the legend of how gamelan started and which instruments were first and what year and everything. There are other people in this group who will be much more expert about these literary sources and what are so Diningrat and where did he get these ideas and everything. But this is the source that Kipur Basmoro used a lot of his work from. He also looked at the Pustaka early volumes, which had some information about this, and a number of volumes, other sources that were in his father's collection. The Weto Paradongo is translated into English, if you're interested in reading it, by Susan Walton. It was translated many years ago by Susan Walton. And apologies, because you're about to see like a big advertisement for Amazon, and some of you might not like that, but you can find the volumes in your libraries and lots of different places. But these three red volumes that a lot of us who are in Gamelan have had on our shelves for decades. These three red volumes called Karawitan Source Readings in Javanese Gamelan and Vocal Music. These are indispensable for you to have if you're studying Gamelan. I'm sure everybody knows that who's here, but maybe not everybody who will eventually listen to this. And then there's a paperback version that's newer. And within volume 2, at the very beginning of volume 2, is the entire translation of the Weto Paradongo by Susan Walton. So you can read it in English. So Kipurbo Asmoro's idea was, I want to tell these legends that are laid out in Weto Paradongo, Pustokorocho, and these other sources, but they're not historical. I don't want to get bogged down in what I'm trying to imagine as historical accuracy, because that's not possible. I want to make a beautiful piece of art. I want to make a beautiful wayang with beautiful music. And if he had imagined that the music had to reflect the era, then we would just hear those 5 instruments, gong, tok, mana, kendang. We would be hearing a very, very minimalist thing for the whole night. And he didn't want that to be the case. He wanted to use lots of different kinds of gamelan music. And he wanted to involve lots of musicians because the musicians are suffering. During the pandemic, they're suffering. And this is a celebration of gamelan. So for him as a dalang to put on this performance and only have 5 musicians, because the original gamelan supposedly only had 5 instruments, it would have been so miserly, I think, in a way, what he was thinking. So he decided a number, 100 musicians. This number popped into his head. And he'll normally, as all of you know, I think, who are on this, normally he would have maybe 30 musicians in a wayang troupe. So he had 3 different groups. He had all different ages. He was very intent on having different ages of musicians. So in his pendopo there on the far side, against that maroon and white striped wall, on the far side is Pujongolaras, which is considered sort of the elderly musicians. Some of them are younger, but generally the classical musicians in solo. And they're playing one of his gamelan sets. He has 3 Javanese gamelan sets that he himself owns. They're playing one of them. And then in the middle there, the musicians who are, I guess that's the best, the musicians who have the blue Jokchinese sort of flowered outfits and the Jokchinese blancon, that's his troupe, Mayan Koro, and they're the core in the middle to support him. And then on this other side, this side over here, the musicians that have wraps on their heads instead of blancon, they're the younger group. They're composers, students from the conservatory, from EC Solo, younger musicians. All 3 gamelan sets had a slightly different tuning, and he adjusted them, which some people felt was a bit of a shame. They all had slightly different tuning. He adjusted them for this performance so that they would match perfectly. And the most amazing thing when we start to play this performance, I think, that you'll find is, oh my gosh, they match. And everybody's playing Ayat Surapak Sampak at the beginning. Everybody's playing Talu. You've got 3 Gindere players. You've got like 10 Demong players. You've got 3 Slentum players. You've got 3 Bonang players. And they're playing different Cengklak, Bonang, and Ginder, but the tuning matches. And then he also invited a Balinese. You see the Balinese group, you'll see it later much up close, but you see them in white, sort of in the corner there, in the diagonal corner. There's a small Balinese group, and then the group in red is from Sumatra. He got a lot of pushback as he was planning this, and people heard about it. Got a lot of people from Banyumas, from West Java, from other regions saying, we want to be in this, we want to be in this. But his technicians were already at their limit for microphones and space and cables. And he finally said, no, this is what we're going to do. Because it turned out that he had plans for the Balinese group that matched the drama on the screen. And he had plans for the Sumatranese group. And he really, that was it. That's all he could kind of picture doing. So this is where you can find the recordings, and I'll be giving this slideshow to you later. There are 3 recordings. There's the Javanese Prabowo Moro official channel on YouTube. There's the Javanese recording, Dumatine Gamelan, the existence of, the origin of the gamelan. And if you lose your connection or the sound and the picture isn't good here once we start playing it, you could go to Prabowo Moro official on YouTube and find it's the first recording there, Dumadine Gamelan. Then my English translation is right next to it on his site. The mythical origin of gamelan is what it's called on his site. And then there's a Japanese translation by Misaki Kishi. She took my English and translated into Japanese, but that's on a different YouTube site. That's on Jani YouTube site. We're going to be looking at the material from about 6 minutes, 50 seconds to 53 minutes or so, stopping and starting. Okay, I just want to show you, this is what Ki Prabowo Moro prepared. You saw some pictures of the rehearsal. This is the entire 5-hour wayang. This is what the musicians received. So they don't receive a big book of notation or something. This is what they received for 5 hours. And you see in the middle there, he's got a big arrow, goro goro. That's when goro goro is going to happen. And dramatically, his sense of timing is that's going to happen exactly halfway through, which pretty much happened. And there's going to be half of the material before, half of the material afterwards. They rehearsed on the day of the performance. As some of you who came in early saw photos of the rehearsal. They started the rehearsal at about 4, kind of 4:30. I was there. We had Pujongoladas Kliningan until 3 o'clock with everybody just hanging around. And then Pujongoladas Kliningan went home and some of them stayed. And we started the rehearsal 4:30-ish. And by 6:30, they all had to go get dressed. And so it was 100 musicians that only rehearsed for about 2 hours using this very minimalist sheet of information. This is a poem. I just want to show it to you. I'll explain it more in other sessions. This is a poem that he used as a red thread or something throughout the whole performance. So it's a Dandang Gulo poem from a piece of poetry called Asmoro Loyo from 1908 that means a lot to Ki Prabowo Moro, and he decided to use it as something that runs through the whole performance. And the performance will open with this poem, but he'll cut it off after 4 lines and go into some of the action. The poem will come back later, it'll come back later, it'll come back later. And towards the middle of the wayang, a priest comes into the kingdom, a sort of ascetic sage from the forest comes into the kingdom and explains what it means. And I asked Ki Prabowo what that poem was about, because this is the origin of gamelan. Why is this poem running through? And he said it's because he had read some sources that also talked about the beginning of documented philosophical thought in Java. Documented. I mean, philosophical thoughts obviously probably been going on forever, right? But the documented philosophical interchange and dialogue had started around the same time as gamelan in the 200s, 300s. And this piece is from 1908, but the point is it runs through the wayang and is finally explained at the point in the kingdom where the gamelan is also given to that particular king. And he wanted to sort of show that that was happening at the same time. Okay, so we will listen now. And what I want you to focus on in the beginning is simply this amazing fact that these gamelans are playing together with all these musicians, and it really sounds as one. They'll play a very short talu of just a very short ayat sarapak sampak, and then Keeper Basmoro will start. Now, I just want to say I mistakenly, so this performance was on Saturday, 22nd of January, 2022. I watched it once, slept the next day, and then on Sunday did the translation. They replayed it and I did the translation. And I had a chance to ask Keeper Basmoro what that poem was. And he mistakenly, it's a long story, but he gave me the incorrect name of the poem. And so that is what you'll see on the sheet. You'll see the incorrect name of the poem. It's actually Asmoroloyo. Okay, so we will start now. Here's the beginning of the performance. Oh, good. Yes. I don't know about you guys, but to me that sounded like one gamelan, maybe a lot of echo, but one gamelan. That was 3 of every instrument.
swara raras raracianing tetabuhan anganyut-anyut nyipta swasana sengsem ing gegana tatan ana wujute nanging endahe lelagon handudut rasa rumesep rumasuk kalbu hambuka pengangen-angen katut kapilut lumebu jagating kaendahan endahing sumanten gamelan lokananta ingkang nyata muning tawang tinabuk dening para gandharwa kuwawana nangirip taning cipta murya satemah sanget kesengsem sang Bathara Indra ya sang Hyang Bathara Surapati hanenggih kasengsem dhateng swantening gendhing dahat denira ngresepi jumeneng hanjeget datan mubah datan musik hamung karasa tentrem katut langening swara gamelan lokananta ingkang satuhunge edapi wis wola-wali marambah makaping meh saben wanci Sang Hyang Indra tansah mirengaken saya sru denira lam-lamen nyurasa rasaning tetabuhan kasuwargan ingkang nyata bangkit maweh tentreming batin
Just want to stop for a minute here. So one thing that really shocked me when I first saw the beginning of his performance, Keeper and I communicate a lot, but he's still very mysterious. Keeps his cards close to his chest. Is very mysterious about his performances, and I knew he wanted to tell the story of Gamelan and how it fell into the hands of mortals. I knew he was basing it largely on the Veda Pradongo, but I had no idea he would start with Gamelan Lokananta already existing. I was ready to see at the beginning Bathara Guru creating Gamelan Lokananta, but he started Gamelan Lokananta already exists in the heavens, being played by the spirits, and Bathara Indra, the god of beauty, is taken by it. And he's about to have a conversation with his wife about how he feels that it should be given a form that we can see, and it should be handed down to mortals. And that really surprised me that he was going to start in the first couple minutes with this question of whether it should be given a form, a shape, and handed down to mortals. And it turned out for the next hour that was the theme of the Wayang. And I don't know, just want to throw out there that there is this whole idea of appropriation right now, and whether gamelan should be allowed to be, studied intensely by who should, who has the right to it, and how much should it be happening overseas. There's a big thing right now, I can say from my perspective in Java, about appropriation. And I thought it was interesting that he started there, and it might be something to talk to him about when he comes on the fifth day of these sessions. Okay, so now Indra is going to have a conversation with his wife about the beauty of this Gamelan Lokananta in the heavens. I also thought it was interesting that the spirit figures that you saw, I don't know if you noticed the spirit figures that you saw playing the gamelan above him, those are figures that he uses in Wayang in other situations for evil spirits. So I expected the spirits to be playing the gamelan to be very nymph-like looking or something. But he used the sort of real aggressive spirits that play the gamelan in the heavens. many of you may recognize this is the closing signature piece of the Mangkunagaran Palace. So another thing Kipura was trying to do is not to try to imitate the gamelan of the time, because who knows, right? But he was bringing in, here's a scene between a god and his wife, a very regal kind of kingdom in the heavens. And so he's using the Mangkunagaran piece for the background of the narration and dialogue.
Ulun saben-saben paduka tansah kesengsem dateng swantening gamelan lokananta ingkang mungel-mungguh ing tawang. Tetela sanget nengsemaken dateng raos namung kenging menapa paduka kados sanget menggalih babagan menika Ulun. Yayi Betari Saci garwanipun Kakang Wong Ayu bener ingkang dadi aturira swaraning gamelan lokananta saya suwe sang saya nabet ana ing tyas ulun. Lajeng kula kigumun dene para gandharwa sanget wasis anggenipun sami ulah budaya tetabuhan ingkang nuwuhaken raos pemarem Ulun Yayi Saci ya. Mula Yayi, mula kegawa saka wateking swara gamelan lokananta ingkang nyata endah nglamlani satemah tuwa gregeting karep lan pepenginan ulun darbi sedya mujudake swara-swara ingkang endah mau supaya ana blegere ingkang sarta bisa tinabuh dening sadengah titah ing marcapada ingkang bisa nabuh ora mung para gandharwa Yayi.
He was very explicit there, so that I need to give the gamelan a shape so that it can be played not only by the spirits in the heavens.
Hatap para hapsari tumonton mring sang dwija kadyoge warjiwa
Sorry, my translation in this spot's a little behind. The musicians in the black that you saw a minute ago, those are the elders. I didn't really think these musicians are also in black. These are the musicians that are wearing the tied scarves. Are the young musicians? It's the musicians you saw a minute ago that are the Putongo Laras group.
Pukulun sanget luhur gegayuhan paduka Pukulun. Namung lajeng kados pundi srana ing kedah katindakaken menapa inggih kanthi srana dipun cipta Pukulun Yayi. Sawetara wektu kepungkur ulun wis nyuwun idi palilah saka ngarsane Kanjeng Rama Pukulun Sang Hyang Guru ya Sang Hyang Jagat Giripati. merga saka karenan penggalihe Kanjeng Rama Pukulun nalika iku mengestoni bakal kabaring wujud tetabuhan iki. Muni inggih pinaros sing manah mendah kados menapa wujuding gamelan ingkang badhe paduka cipta Pukulun tentu kewala badhe dados pangeram-eraming bawana Pukulun. Iya Yayi. Muga-muga babagan iki dadi lader sepisanan ananing tetabuhan ingkang bisa kinaryasrana nyiram jiwa menepke budi sarta ngleremake rasa sejati. Dewa nyuga temarang sureng pangudane arum-arum ngendan wing awiyat.
I think this is an important message here, that the reason he wants to hand the gamelan down to the mortals is that it will help forge calm, peace, and a deep inner sense of truth. That's the reason he wants it to, he feels that the mortals should have access to it.
Narado ngepalani Jawata sukamulat Derek bingah sarta sanget sengsem rasing manah mugi-mugi saged kasembatan sedya paduka Pukulun Yayi Sajiya. Bakal ulun ketok pambudidaya ulun kanthi sewu cara ngasah lan debing pangangen-angen murih ing kalau kasembatan gegayuhan ulun. Nuwun inggih garwa paduka tansah nderek meminta dhateng panguwasin yang agung mugi-mugi saged tedha ing karya Pukulun. Lengan ingkang sasongko menyar mengrenggrome puri mengrenggrome puri pamoring suksma sinoksmaya pinak pengen sepi kirim pentolong ingkang pambukaning kembang popong tara tepang rara yungan rarayungan long maleng kong katyupeng marutomondo.
So this is the Pujangalaras group, and the Gandhar player used to play when he was very young with Pak Kundo Darman. He's a Gandhar player when he was very, very young, and sometimes the drummer for Pak Kundo Darman, and sometimes Bonang player. And the Rabab player who's playing right now is a young guy, Mas Bayu from Kartosuro. But the man sitting next to him is the older Pujangalaras player, Pak Muriono from Klaten.
Manggut asih.
This is the Gandhar player from Isi Solo, Mas Sikit.
Yanti lolo karya sengsem kang tumingal Kak Yendra aja kaget iki nuhoni apa ingin dadi keparengmu sawetara wektu kepungkur nggih. Sedulur-sedulurmu wis padha teka mrene kabeh tak kanthi. Reh ning nyatane sira kaki wis nyuwun palilah marang adi guru kaya kang wis sira karepake. Para dewa-dewa kabeh iki bakal nyengkuyung. Ya Sikamajaya, ya si Sambu, Brahma, Bayu, lan liyane klebu iki Empu Rama Yadi. Ya si Yadi. Lan
Romo Yadi is the god the god figure who creates the gamelan, Lokananta, another gamelan. He's the craftsman of the gods, and he also has a cauldron where you can throw various alloys in. Anytime anybody needs a cauldron of metals, Romayati is the god that they go to. But one of his musicians that actually he recently let go and who's not playing tonight, his name is Yadi. And so that's why they're all laughing when he says, Romayati, Yadi.
Anake si Angga Jali minangka
And one of the gods, the Romayadi's apprentice is named Angodali, and one of his apprentices' name is Anga.
pinangka panggening dewa. Inggih Pukulan. Rene sampeyan wis padha. Parto ing kene banjur kepiye karsanira Kagendra? Ngapuraken ageng panuning tanpa pami Pukulan. Yai Suropati. Pun Kakang uga ora bakal didha-didha marang lakon iki. Ya, Yai, pun Kakang swarga dahana. Uga mung tansah nderek umiring apa kang dadi keparengi Yai. Wah, semono uga aku. Semono uga pun Kakang Cakra Kembang Yai. Wis kepiye karep Indra? Won rada. Wiwitipun kula kepengin mujudaken suwantening gangsa Lokananta. Inggih wiwit. Dene manah kula nalika kesengsem dhateng gamelan Lokananta ingkang kacipta dening Kanjeng Rama Pukulun Bathara Guru nalika ngejawantah wonten ing Pulo Jawi. Mapan wonten ing Gunung Mahendra. Rikala warsa 127. Sepisan malih rikala warsa 127 dipun paringi tetenger swara karenging jagat inggih nalika kacipta nggih namung swanten ingkang kacariyos tinabuh dening para Gandharwa namung nyatanipun boten nate wonten wujudipun. Lah iya. Lah namung cacahing swanten tetabuhan gangsa Lokananta menika dawuhipun Kanjeng Rama Pukulun wonten gangsal. Ingkang sepisan inggih menika gending. Ingkang angka 2 pamatut, ingkang angka 3 sauran, ingkang angka 50 tetek, wonten ingkang angka gangsal maguru. Mawi laguning kidung utawi sekar. Lah, rening swanten gamelan Lokananta badhe ulun wujudaken sedya kula ingkang sepisan inggih menika gending. Lah gending sing munine mung ting-tong kuwi. Inggih.
So I'm sure all of you know, I think all of you know who are on this link right now. Kamana are the sort of banana-shaped bronze ringers that go ding dong ding da da ding dong ding da da. So that's why he said, "Oh, that gamelan that goes ding dong ding," like that. So in the Wedo Pradongo, it talks about how Gamelan Lokananta only had these 5 instruments. The kamana that you hear in Badayan and Mongang and different things, and the katok, kanang, kandang, and gong.
Namung menika rak gamelan Lokananta nanging badhe kula damel benten. Lah, kok beta iki piye mengko praduka Sangya Jagat Giripati sampun paring palilah dhateng kula. Lah wujude piye? Wujudipun mangke mawi batrokan ingkang dipun tutup kados cerma tipis klethekaning babat kewan saha mawi watangan utawi deder. Sumber swantenipun manut pangraos ulun inggih menika saking tali ingkang wujud kuningan dipun kosok mawi bubat jaran sembrani. Wah. Lah kok munine gak elek kuwi. Dikosok, inggih. Lah kok nek ora iso sing nabuh kok kaya wong graji. Piye kok? Mboten Pukulun mangke wonten gegladen. Oh ya. Lah nek ngono kok katone nek wujud tenan iki mengko luwih apik awit nek gamelan Lokananta gending ngono tegese.
So of course, as you can tell, he's saying it's driving me crazy to watch my translation, by the way. It's just driving me insane. I wish I could type faster and better. But what he's saying is, basically what he's saying, he's going to take the kamana, give it a shape, make a coconut shell, close it off with some sort of skin, and have some strings there, and have somebody, bow it with some horsehair. And of course, Narada's saying that sounds like that would just sound terrible. That would be really hard, and not many people would be good. It would just sound terrible. Of course, this is all, that's not in the Wedo Pradongo, that whole kind of joke sequence. Obviously, these are parts that Kiparabo is making up to give life to the performance. So he's going to take the kamana and turn it into a rabab. And that is in the Wedo Pradongo, that Bataro Indra's gamelan had something called gending, which was rabab, whereas in Lokananta, the gending was the kamana. But the whole idea of joking about it, of course, is Kiparabo.
Suara sing mengkrungu tang-tang kuwi mongko iki mengko suarane mesti ndudut rasa. Inggih Pukulun. Banjur kepiye karepmu? Kula damel benten gending mriki badhe kula damel supados saged damel lagu. Oh ngono? Nggih. Lah banjur parenge Sendra kok nekake adimu sing glugu tinatar. Sigono barang ki apa karepmu? Piye Kakang aku mbok kon ngopo? Yayi, nalika Yayi Bathara Gana mbiyen perang gedhe lumawan Prabu Nila Ludraka. Mbiyen gadingmu sempal. Yen to sempalane gadingmu mau isih ana bakal ulun dadekake watangan ya dedering gending mau.
Now, I don't know, have other people read the Wedo Pradongo more carefully than I have recently? I think Kiparbo is making this up, but maybe somebody can correct me. So this god on the right, to the right of Kiparbo is Ganesha. He's the elephant with the tusk. And Kiparbo very recently, only a few weeks before this, did the story of Ganesha as one of his lakon. And he enters a battle, and his tusk is broken. And he's saying, Ganesha says, "Well, what's my part in all of this? How can I contribute?" And Naroda says, "Do you still have the broken tusk from that battle?" And he says, "Yes." He says, "Well, you could make it the body of the Rabab." Ben or anybody else, do you recognize that from the Wedo Pradongo? I don't.
No recollection of that.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's making that. I think he's making that as part of his creative part of this, and also because he just performed the story of Ganesha, and he often does that where he's crafting his audience. He's like educating his audience. He's bringing them with him. You know, they just saw the whole story of Ganesha and his tusk and everything. He's reminding them of that and bringing it into this performance.
Ijek ora digoleki. Ya teliti temen lah. Ale perang wis zaman ora enak kok. Apa ya isih tasih pukulan tasih kula reksa. Digoleki sing tenan lho, engko mbok dol. Mboten pukulan. Nah, iya. Lajeng ingkang angka kalih ingkang nami pamatut sauran kalian maguru menika kados saking bangsaning pelikan. Pelikan ki apa nek dewa saiki ora ngerti kok. Inggih.
Now he's suggesting that the katok be given form through some sort of alloy, metals, shavings, some sort of combination of metal. He's coming up with that idea.
Menika bangsaning pelikan menapa mustikaning tosan, menapa mustikaning mojo, menapa bangsaning rejasa lan tembaga. Lah nek
So he's saying, should it be the best of irons, the best of he names different things. He says the word for steel. I'm not sure. Was steel around back then, Bob? Anyway, he says the best. Should it be the best of irons, the best of steel, or the best of copper? Now they're going to come up with this idea of mixing copper and tin to make something new.
nek perkara wesi itakono pandhening dewa sing kulina gawe gamaning kadewatan si Rama Yadi kuwi. Rama Yadi, kula wonten dawuh pukulun. Piye? Pukulun menawi saking kangge kula ingkang langkung prayogi menika mbok menawi kadamel saking tembaga lan rejasa. Iya. Ulun uga nayogyani kang mengkono coba nyampura tembaga lan rejasa wondene etungane talitinen dhisik supaya becik ing swara banjur ingkang pekasan kan aran tetek. Wa pukulun pemanggih handika wa pukulun kados pundi? Lah ngene. Yen ulun sak ngrungokke gamelan lokananta kae swara tetek mau kaya sing murba wiramaning gamelan kaya sing murba iramaning gamelan lan nek diwujudke kaya ora prayoga nek digawe saka tembaga lan rejasa nanging gawe saka kayu sing dibolong tengah banjur tinutup mawa lulanging kebon danu minangka sumbering swara kuwi saka getring lulang kuwi.
So he's saying one of the instruments that leads the rhythm should not be made out of copper and tin. That should be something else so that it stands apart. And that should be made of a piece of hollowed out wood where skin is put on either end. And so he's describing the kendang. So we'll have the rabab made from the tusk of the elephant, a coconut shell, a skin, and bowed with horsehair. We'll have the katok, the kanang, and the gong made out of a combination of copper and tin. And we'll have the leader, the kendang, made from a piece of hollowed out wood with skin on both ends.
Bumi gonjeng langit.
And after that decision, time for an ododo. So that's the function of the suluan.
Katon lerkin sanging alis risang mawe gandrung sabaran katulu wukir moyak mayik. Aduh, oh iki ngaturaken ageng panuning tanpa pepindhan. Menawi katon wekdal menika ugi tumuli badhe kawiwitan. Rama Yadilan sira anggonjali kula wonten dawuh Pukulun. Ingkang nglumpukna pelikan saakeh-akeh ingkang awujud tembaga lan rejasa. Dene pangobonge ulun bakal minta sraya Kakang Pukulun Bathara Brama mamrih bisa nyipta Hakni Besalen ingkang mahanani sampurna pangleburing pelikan bebagal gamelan. Kawula nuwun inggih Kakang Pukulun swarga daonan Kakang Pukulun swela gring-gring kula. Nyun sih pitulungan dika ya Yayi aja semelang. Wah, aku semono uga bakal makar. Payan mangkono kang padha prayitna ngakyati tumuli ayo. Budal nggih.